Okay, we're going to talk about retouching these photos that you captured with the model. And if you used my camera, then you definitely captured in Camera Raw. If you used your own camera, I was asking you to set your camera to Camera Raw. So that's the first step in the process. Let's see, File, Open. Actually, before we go anywhere, let's go to, that's where it is, Edit, Color Settings, and make sure that your workspace, which is this desktop workspace, your RGB is Adobe RGB 1998. Right, ProPhoto RGB is a bigger color gamut, a bigger palette, if you will. Our sRGB, this 1966, is a smaller color gamut. Adobe RGB is right in the middle, and that's what we should use. And make sure that the gray is Gray Gamma 2.2. Everything else I wouldn't worry about. So hit OK. Now we find our file. Where is it? Here it is. And I just double click on it, or I can click on it and hit open. And it will open in the Camera Raw workspace. It's a separate floating workspace. Now the averaged exposure in this is good, but because we have bright white shirt and nice black garments and boots, the shirt might be a little overexposed. It's pretty good, but the garment is definitely underexposed. It's a little tough when it's at the extremes. Let's see what happens. Actually, I always go over here and see what auto does. Okay, so what that's doing is it's looking to open up the dark areas, but her face is a little overexposed. It's not bad. Actually, it's really not bad at all. That could work, but let's do this manually. I'm not going to worry about the highlights and shadows yet. I'm just going to look at the whites and blacks. I'm going to set my white point and my black point. If I press the Option key, as I move the white point left and right, I move right to open up the whites and get just barely a white point. I'll do the same with the black. I have to move to the left to get a black point. See, I've got a little black there. Mostly blue, but you can see in the bottom there's some black. Okay, that's set the extremes. This is white, and in here is pure black. But that seems too contrasty. Let's see what happens if I just open up the exposure, give it more exposure. I don't mind that this shoulder is going white. I'm just making sure that the highlights in the cheeks and the nose and lips, and especially on our hand, which is closest to our light source, don't go totally white. Now if I go a little too far, just a little too far, see how her hand is getting, there's still some tone there, but it's almost too light. That's what the highlight slider's for. I can bring this back and kind of mellow out the highlights. Let's reset this to where's fit in. All right, it's off my screen, but if you keep scrolling down, there's a thing that says fit in view. Here's where I can go back to the whites and hit Option and dial it back until there's just a little white point in that blue. Shadows, if I move it to the right, I lighten the shadows a little bit. Can you see that? lightens the shadows without affecting the deepest, darkest blacks until I get all the way to the right. So you want to open the shadows a little bit so I can see the garment, and then I'll hit Option and check the black, and I'll move left until I have a black point or a couple black lines. That gives some definition. Now what's really cool is down here, is this the one? Oh, that's previous. Okay, so that resets everything. If I hit this Y shape deal, it has a before and after. So on the left is before, on the right is after. Let's see if I can reset this to where it was. Just getting a white point, a black point. That's probably a little overexposed. Bring the exposure down, open the shadows up. Actually, I want to mellow out the highlights. There we go. That's nice and bright without getting too bright. Clarity is kind of dangerous for people because it tends to kind of pixelate and look fake. We want skin to be smooth except for the pores and the actual natural features. So leave clarity alone with people. If you're doing landscapes and other things, play with that slider. Saturation is just how saturated this is with color. If you desaturate it, you lose the color. If you desaturate for black and white, actually I wouldn't use desaturation all the way down for black and white. There's a better way to do that. Pull the saturation down just a little bit so we lose a little bit of yellow and magenta. Okay. White balance. See what that does. We were actually shooting with a flash, so that's pretty good. Looks a little green. See how she looks a little green? What we can do is complement a green as magenta. You can bump a little magenta back in there. Okay. If you're not sure, if you really want to have accurate white balance, you can go up here and pick one of these eyedropper tools. And while white balance is selected, so see one of these numbers is highlighted, you can just select a white area until you get the white balance you need. It's trying to compensate. And I think flash worked well. That works fine. Okay, so we have on the left where we started and we have on the right where we are now. It's a little bit washed out. I'm going to bring the exposure down a little more. Here we go. So her face isn't too light, and I'm going to open up the shadows even more. Okay, all of this can be redone. Because we did this in RAW, it means that any adjustments are in a second file, like a mini database, keeping track of all the adjustments we made. We haven't actually made the adjustments to the image itself. We've just instructed the computer what we want it to do. So these adjustments aren't permanent. This is non-destructive. I can reset and do this all over again. I can hit this guy and reset the whole thing. One thing I might want to do, I might want to get rid of some of this blue, but yeah, it's a little easier to do in Photoshop. Okay. See up here, top left, I can change the vertical skew of this whole picture. Okay, I changed the aspect. I can make the whole thing thinner. You rotate it forward, rotate it back. And now it looks like her foot is just a little further forward than her head, which it is. If I want this area to be lighter than the top, here's a gradient. Say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So she gets a lot lighter and it slowly has less and less effect. What I can do is take this whole thing, grab it, turn it around. And now I can make an adjustment layer on a gradient. And a lot of times there's fall off. Like if the light is up here, it's more intense towards the top and gets darker towards the bottom. So this is a good technique of correcting the light. You can adjust it like this. Now things look more even. Let's do a new one. You can even do that locally. I can go right here, this oval, and that's a local adjustment brush, which I'm not going to keep this, but let's see. So everything outside this oval is adjusted. What I'm going to do is just zero this out because I don't want to use it. I could always just kind of throw it away. All right. So when you get it close to where you want, you just open the image and it will open up in Photoshop.